Kind girl saved injured stranger unaware he's a single dad billionaire soldier he loved married. Elena Harper walked home under the dim glow of streetlights, her worn sneakers scuffing against the uneven pavement of a quiet suburban neighborhood. At 22, she carried the weight of a long day on her shoulders. Multiple low-paying jobs, from waitressing to cleaning, barely kept her afloat. Her small apartment was always one missed paycheck, away from slipping out of reach. But Elena's resilience held her together, even when it frayed at the edges. She'd known loss, her parents gone in a car accident at 16, heartbreak from a broken engagement, and the constant grind of survival. Yet, those hardships had shaped her into someone selfless, her empathy, a quiet light in a world that often felt dark. She never hesitated to help, whether it was a struggling coworker or a stranger on the street, offering kindness without expecting anything in return. It was a compassion born from her own pain, a belief that sometimes a little care could change everything. As she passed a small park near her apartment, a sudden screech of tires shattered the night silence. A car swerved off the road, crashing into a tree with a deafening thud. Elena's heart skipped a beat, her breath catching as she sprinted toward the wreckage, her shoes slapping the pavement, her mind laser-focused on one thing: helping. The driver, a man in his mid-30s, was slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. Elena reached the car, her hands trembling but steady, as she carefully tilted his head back against the seat, checking his pulse. It was weak but steady, his shallow breaths a fragile relief. His sharp blue eyes fluttered open, groggy and unfocused, as he tried to make sense of the chaos. "Stay with me," Elena said softly, her voice calm despite the adrenaline racing through her. She dialed emergency services, her focus unwavering, not caring who he was, only that he needed her. In the back seat, a young boy, no older than 6, watched through fogged-up glass, his small face pressed against the seat. Zane's wide eyes locked onto Elena, his small chest rising with quick, frightened breaths. Despite his own pain from the crash, he felt a strange comfort watching her, her kindness a stark contrast to the strangers who'd passed by, too busy to notice. Elena caught his gaze and offered a gentle smile, her presence a quiet reassurance in the midst of the chaos. The man, Alexander Stone, fought to stay conscious, his head spinning, vision blurred. A billionaire soldier and CEO of a powerful security firm, he'd built walls around his heart after years of distrust and loss. His wife's death, the burden of raising Zane alone. Yet, in his foggy state, he couldn't help but notice Elena's calm demeanor, her genuine care as she stayed by his side. She didn't know his wealth or status, treating him like any other person in need, a rarity that struck him deeply. As sirens approached, Elena stepped back, watching the paramedics take over. The ambulance lights flashed into the night, but her thoughts lingered on the man and the boy. Something in her gut told her this wasn't just a random act of kindness. It felt like a turning point, a moment that would ripple through her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Elena Harper stood in the sterile hospital room, the beeping of machines a quiet backdrop, as she held a stack of paperwork for Alexander Stone. The 22-year-old had come to check on the man she'd saved after his car crash, her heart still heavy with the memory of that chaotic night. Alexander, 35, lay in the bed, his body bandaged, but his sharp blue eyes now alert, watching her with a mix of gratitude and unease. She'd just overheard his assistant mention his staggering wealth, a billionaire soldier, CEO of a powerful security firm, and the revelation had left her reeling. Yet, as Zane's small voice called her from the hallway, his innocent face peeking around the corner, Elena's doubts melted away. She smiled, kneeling beside the 6-year-old, her warmth a comfort to him. "Hey there, how are you doing?" she asked gently, her voice soft as she brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. Zane didn't answer at first, his wide eyes flitting toward his father, then back to Elena. He'd been silent for so long, used to people passing him by without a glance. But Elena's gaze was different, gentle, understanding. She didn't see him as just Alexander Stone's son. She saw him. Over the next few days, Elena found herself visiting more often, not out of obligation, but because of a connection with Zane she couldn't ignore. She played games with him, helped with his homework, and listened to his small worries, things a 6-year-old shouldn't carry alone. His loneliness began to fade, the hollow space in his heart filling with the warmth she brought. One evening, as Elena helped Zane with a school project at the Stone Mansion, Alexander stood in the doorway, watching from a distance. The luxurious room with its marble floors and high ceilings felt cold despite the warm light of the desk lamp. Elena leaned over the desk, guiding Zane through a tricky math problem, her patience unwavering. "You've got this, Zane," she said softly, her tone soothing as she pointed to the paper. Zane looked up at her with a level of trust Alexander had never seen, his small face bright with focus. It made Alexander pause, a pang of guilt tightening his chest. He'd been so absent, his son emotionally distant, yet Elena had unlocked something raw and real in him. Alexander couldn't ignore the change in Zane. The boy was happier, more talkative, more engaged. It stung to realize Elena had brought something to life in his son that he'd failed to do for years. The more time Elena spent with Zane, the more she saw his quiet strength, his need to be seen as more than a product of his father's wealth. She didn't care about the luxury of his world or the power Alexander wielded. To her, Zane was just a little boy who needed love, and she gave it freely. Later that week, Alexander called Elena to his office, the sterile grandeur of the space, a stark contrast to her modest life. He sat across from her, his voice clipped but sincere. "I wanted to thank you for what you did after the accident," he began, his eyes searching hers. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." Elena nodded, expression steady, no trace of awe over his status. "You don't need to thank me," she said simply. "It's what anyone would have done." But Alexander wasn't so sure, and as their eyes met, he felt a stirring he hadn't known in years, a quiet pull toward the kind girl who'd entered his life so unexpectedly. Alexander Stone sat in the sleek office of his security firm, the city skyline glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but his mind was far from the high-stakes merger papers on his desk. At 35, he'd built an empire, a billionaire soldier turned CEO, yet the conversation with Elena Harper replayed in his head like a haunting melody. "Zane needs you, emotionally," she'd said, her words slicing through the walls he'd spent years constructing. The 22-year-old's directness had unsettled him, but what lingered more was the fleeting brush of their hands during their last meeting at the mansion. A spark that sent his pulse racing, a feeling he hadn't known since his wife's passing. Elena's presence had shifted something in him. Over the past few days, Alexander watched his son, Zane, more closely than ever. The 6-year-old sat in the corner of the living room, his small hands gripping a drawing he'd spent hours on, a picture of him, Alexander, and Elena, smiling under a bright sun. "Dad?" Zane's voice was small, hesitant, as he looked up. Alexander knelt beside him, the carpet soft under his knees, his heart heavy. "What is it, buddy?" he asked, his tone softer than it had been in years. Zane's eyes darted to the side, then back to his father. "I like when Elena helps me. She listens. She doesn't get mad when I don't understand, like you do." The words hit Alexander like a punch, his throat tightening with guilt. He'd been so consumed by his business, dealing with mergers, partners, and media scrutiny, that he'd neglected Zane's emotional needs. "I'm sorry, Zane," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I've been busy, but I'll be there for you more. You don't have to do it alone." Zane's eyes brightened, a flicker of hope in his small face. But Alexander knew promises weren't enough. He needed to act. The next time Elena visited, the air between them felt different, charged with an unspoken tension. They sat at the dining table, helping Zane with a school project about planets. The boys' laughter filling the room as Elena pointed out Jupiter's rings on a chart. Their hands brushed again, a fleeting touch as they reached for the same marker, and Elena quickly pulled back, her cheeks flushing. Alexander's breath caught, his heart racing as their eyes met for a brief, electric moment. They both looked away, pretending nothing had happened, but the attraction simmering beneath the surface was undeniable. Elena couldn't ignore how her heart raced, nor could Alexander dismiss the pull he felt toward her, a connection that went beyond gratitude, something deeper neither could define. But Alexander's world was far from simple. His security firm was in the midst of a high-stakes merger, and the pressure was mounting. Partners questioned his focus, colleagues whispered about his distraction, and the media speculated why the powerful CEO seemed so detached. "You're slipping, Stone," his lead investor had barked over a call that morning, the words echoing in his mind as he watched Elena and Zane from across the room. Balancing his business and this newfound connection with his son and Elena was taking a toll. He wanted to be the father Zane deserved, the man Elena saw in him, but the shadows of his responsibilities loomed large, threatening to pull him back into the life he'd always known, a life where walls were easier than vulnerability. Alexander Stone stood in his sleek office, the city skyline a glittering backdrop, but the whispers of his colleagues echoed louder than the view. At 35, the billionaire CEO of a powerful security firm was known for his ruthless focus, yet lately, people noticed a change. He was preoccupied, distracted by matters far removed from business. They didn't understand what was happening inside him, how his relationship with his son, Zane, and Elena Harper had begun to unravel the walls he'd built around his heart. The high-stakes merger demanded his attention, but his thoughts lingered on the 22-year-old who'd entered his life so unexpectedly, and the 6-year-old boy who needed her more than ever. Elena felt the weight of the situation too. The more time she spent with Zane, the more she realized the vast chasm between her modest life and Alexander's world of luxury and influence. The stone mansion, with its marble floors and towering ceilings, made her feel small, out of place, like an outsider who'd never belong. Despite her growing feelings for Alexander and her deep love for Zane, the gnawing doubt inside her wouldn't fade. She was a girl who'd spent her life fighting to survive, and this world felt impossible to navigate. With a heavy heart, she decided to pull away, believing it was best for Zane. She started distancing herself, making excuses when Zane asked her to play, avoiding Alexander's calls and texts, telling herself she was protecting the boy from the complications she brought. But Zane didn't understand. Every day without Elena felt like a loss. The bright, talkative boy who'd begun to open up retreated into himself, his once sparkling eyes now dull, his energy muted. He'd wait by the door, hoping she'd show up, but she never did. His moods darkened, his silence heavier than ever. Elena noticed the change when she couldn't avoid him entirely. His wide, desperate eyes broke her heart, each look a pang of guilt. She was hurting him more by staying away, but the pull of a world she didn't belong to kept her at a distance. One evening, after a long day, Elena sat alone in her small apartment, the cracked walls a stark contrast to the mansion she'd left behind. Her phone rang, Alexander's name flashing on the screen. His voice was steady but laced with concern. "Where are you?" he asked, direct and urgent. "Zane's not okay. He's asking for you. He's struggling." Elena's heart sank, her resolve wavering. "I can't," she said, her voice trembling. "It's too much, Alexander. Your world, I don't understand it. I'm just making things harder. Zane deserves better." There was a long pause, then Alexander's reply, firm and raw. "You're wrong, Elena. You're exactly what Zane needs, what we both need." Later that evening, Alexander stood in the doorway of Zane's bedroom, the sight of his son breaking his heart. Zane sat on the edge of his bed, his face buried in his hands, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Zane," Alexander said, softly sitting beside him, his voice strained with emotion. "What's going on, buddy?" Zane looked up, his small face wet and broken. "I want her back, Dad," he sobbed. "I miss her. I need her. She makes me feel like I matter. Don't let her go, please." The words shattered Alexander's hardened exterior. Elena wasn't just a kind stranger anymore. She was irreplaceable, a vital piece of their lives, and her absence had left a void he couldn't ignore. Alexander Stone stood in the quiet park where it all began, the same park where Elena Harper had rushed to his crashed car weeks ago, saving his life. At 35, the billionaire CEO had spent years hiding behind walls of distrust, believing love made him weak. But watching his son, Zane, break down over Elena's absence had shattered that illusion. Love wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. After a sleepless night, Alexander knew he couldn't let Elena slip away. He approached her with determination in his sharp blue eyes, the morning sun casting soft shadows on the grass. Elena, 22, looked up, startled, her worn sneakers rooted to the ground, her heart racing as he closed the distance. "Elena," he said, "wait." His voice low but firm, cutting through the morning air. "You're not leaving. Not like this. Not without understanding what you mean to us." She opened her mouth to protest, the weight of their different worlds heavy on her chest. But Alexander stopped her, his gaze unwavering. "Zane needs you. I need you. And for the first time in years, I'm not going to let fear stop me from fighting for what matters." His words struck her deep, piercing through her doubts. Despite the vast differences in their lives, Elena felt the truth in his voice, a connection worth fighting for, something real and unshakable. Back at the Stone Mansion, Alexander stood by the large windows overlooking the sprawling garden, his thoughts a storm of emotions. The walls he'd built to keep out pain were crumbling, and he wasn't sure how to navigate the vulnerability that came with it. But one thing was certain. Elena had become indispensable. She'd brought warmth to his cold, lonely world, transforming not just his life, but Zane's. The 6-year-old's laughter now filled the mansion, a sound Alexander hadn't heard in years, all because of her. He knew he had to show Elena she belonged, not as a visitor, but as part of their family. That evening, Alexander arranged an intimate gathering at the mansion. No lavish displays, just a simple, warm setting with soft lighting and a few close friends. Elena arrived, her modest sweater a contrast to the grandeur around her, feeling the weight of unfamiliar gazes. She'd always felt out of place in Alexander's world, but as he walked toward her, his posture firm, yet his eyes soft, she sensed something different. He gently pulled her to the center of the room, the guests falling silent. "Elena," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge something that's been on my mind for a while now. You've come into our lives and changed everything. You've brought light into a world filled with shadows, and you've given Zane and me something we didn't even know we were missing: hope. You've never asked for anything in return." Elena's breath caught, her eyes glistening, as she looked at Alexander, then at Zane, who stood nearby clutching a small drawing of the three of them. The boy's wide eyes were bright with hope, his small hand reaching for hers. In that moment, Elena realized she wasn't an outsider anymore. She was home. Alexander's words weren't just gratitude. They were a promise, a step toward a future where love, not fear, would guide them. Elena Harper stood by the window of the Stone Mansion. the night sky stretching endlessly before her, stars twinkling like the hope she now felt in her heart. Moments ago, Alexander Stone had confessed his love, his words breaking through the last of her doubts. At 22, she'd never imagined a place in his world, a billionaire soldier, a CEO at 35, whose life was so far removed from her own struggles. But as she whispered, "I love you too," a tear slipping down her cheek, the barriers between their worlds dissolved, replaced by the unbreakable bond they'd forged. Alexander's steady grip on her hands, his blue eyes free of fear, told her this was real. The room fell silent after their confession, the last guests having left the intimate gathering. Zane, the 6-year-old who'd brought them together, had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching the drawing he'd made of the three of them. Alexander led Elena to the garden, the cool night air a gentle contrast to the warmth in her chest. "There's something I've been planning," he said, his voice soft but filled with purpose. "Something to show you how much you mean to me, not just with words but with action." Elena tilted her head, her curiosity piqued, her heart still racing from his earlier confession. Alexander had remembered a conversation from weeks ago, a casual moment when Elena had shared a dream she'd never pursued. She'd always wanted to start a charity for underprivileged children, to give them opportunities she'd never had growing up, a chance to learn, to dream, to thrive. It was a passion born from her own hardships, but life's struggles had kept it out of reach. Alexander had spent weeks planning, his resources as a billionaire now channeled into something far more meaningful than business deals. "I've set up a foundation in your name," he said, his voice steady with conviction. "The Elena Harper Foundation for Children. It's fully funded, with a team ready to bring your vision to life." Elena's breath caught, her eyes widening as the weight of his words sank in. She'd never imagined her dream could become reality, let alone through the man standing before her. "Alexander, I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. He stepped closer, his hands gently cupping her face, his touch warm and reassuring. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "You've given Zane and me a family again, a reason to hope, to love. This is my way of showing you that you're not just part of our world, you're the heart of it." Tears welled in Elena's eyes as she looked at him, then at the sleeping Zane through the window. The little boy who'd opened her heart, the man who'd taught her love, could bridge any divide. They were her family now. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking, as she wrapped her arms around Alexander, her head resting against his chest. "This means more than I can ever say." In that moment, under the starlit sky, Elena knew she wasn't just a kind stranger anymore. She was a partner, a dreamer, a vital piece of a family that had found its way back to love. Elena Harper stood in the center of the grand venue, her heart pounding as the applause from the crowd faded into a gentle hum. At 22, she'd never imagined her dream of starting a charity for underprivileged children would come to life. Yet here it was, the Elena Harper Foundation, fully funded and supported, thanks to Alexander Stone. The 35-year-old billionaire had poured his heart into this gesture, showing her she was worth more than she'd ever believed. As he held her hand, his blue eyes filled with unwavering love, Elena felt the last of her insecurities melt away. "Thank you, Alexander," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. "This is everything I've ever wanted." The crowd dispersed, leaving the couple alone under the soft glow of the venue's lights. Alexander stepped closer, his voice steady with emotion. "I believe in you, Elena," he said, his hand gently squeezing hers. "This is your chance to make the world a better place, and I'll be by your side every step of the way." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at him, her heart full. She'd always doubted her worth, her humble beginnings making her feel unworthy of his world. But Alexander's gesture was more than a grand display. It was a gift from his heart, proof that he valued her for who she was. Later that night, back at the Stone Mansion, the air was quiet, the earlier buzz of the event replaced by a serene stillness. Elena gazed out at the sprawling garden, her arms wrapped around herself, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Alexander approached, his presence a comforting warmth behind her. "I love you," she said softly, turning to face him, her voice filled with certainty. "I love you more than I ever thought possible, and I'm not scared anymore, not of us, not of the future." Alexander pulled her close, kissing her forehead, his arms a safe haven. "I love you too, Elena," he replied, his voice tender. "I've loved you for a long time, even when I didn't know how to say it." Their doubts, fears, and insecurities dissolved in that embrace, the barriers between their worlds gone. Zane, who'd been watching from the side, ran over, his small arms wrapping around both of them. "I'm glad you two are happy," he said, his 6-year-old voice brimming with sincerity. "You make each other better." Elena knelt down, brushing his hair back, her heart swelling with love for the boy who'd first opened her heart. Alexander smiled, his once hardened exterior softened by the family they'd become. In that moment, they were complete, a family united by love, stronger than ever. As they stood together, the mansion's lights casting a warm glow around them, it was clear no obstacle could stand in their way. The love they shared had healed the wounds of Alexander's past, his loss, his distrust, and given Elena a place to belong, a purpose to chase. Their connection was unbreakable, a journey that had started with a selfless act of kindness in a park, now blossoming into a future filled with hope, joy, and endless possibilities. Together, they looked forward to a life where love would always lead the way. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful journey in Kind Girl Saved Injured Stranger, unaware he's a single dad billionaire soldier he loved married. Elena and Alexander's story reminds us that love and kindness can bridge any divide, creating bonds that heal and inspire. We're so grateful for your support. It means the world to Timeline Stories. If their journey warmed your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts. Your feedback helps us grow. Until next time, keep spreading love and hope wherever you go.